Hey everybody, welcome. I have Suris here today, and I'm gonna get to know the man behind the cool ass avatar a little bit better. Would you like to introduce yourself?
No, I'm kidding.
I'm just,
I'm
I
kidding.
know.
How's it, guys? How's it going, guys? I almost said, "How's it, guys?" Wow. Okay, that lack of sleep is definitely kicking in. So my name is Suris. I have a channel where I talk about things like woo debunking, video responses. I have a section on my channel for philosophy, and then I've got a podcast as well. And here recently, we've been running a bit of a show with me, Bionic Dance, Frustrated Atheist, and Atheist Rationale, where we've been going over Matt Powell's latest clusterfuck of a video. He did a whole movie called Science Falsely So Called, and we're debunking that right now. Apparently, we might actually have Aaron Raw on for that at some point. He expressed some interest in that, so that's something that might be in the works.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. Um, okay, I guess we'll start with first off. Did you grow up in a religious household?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I guess my next question would probably be then. So, what denomination?
It wasn't actually denominational.
Okay.
It was a non-denominational. We went to a non-denominational church when we went, and we had a non-denominational school. It was actually Pensacola Christian Academy. They accepted everybody from Lutherans to Catholics to Methodists to Baptists. If you were there, then you were able to, you know, be there and be Christian and serve the Lord, as it were. They had multiple churches on campus. One like big mega church on their college campus that was linked to their other campus that had a smaller like homey church called St. John's. So, depending on what brand of Christianity you fell into, they had a church for that.
Huh. That's strange to see Catholics and Lutherans and Methodists and Baptists all mixed together like that. It's different.
Yeah,
Um,
it's one reason that I never could understand the viewpoint when somebody said that, oh well, Catholics aren't Christians. I could never get it because that's not how I grew up. And then as I got older and started like actually reading more into scripture and reading more into different types of religions, it started to make less and less sense to me still, because at that point it was like, well, you've got 14,000 denominations of Christianity. Are you saying that only yours is right and all the others are wrong? Or are you saying all the others are right except for the Catholics? Which one is it?
right.
So I'm actually going to be getting there's a guy named Max. He's called the Catholic Fusionist. He is a Catholic, and I've debated against him before on Non Sequitur Show. I'm going to have him on my channel here in the coming weeks to do a video on why Catholics are still Christians, because especially with me tackling NIFB, that's one of the biggest things that they go into, is that they're the only type of Christians that matter. The other Baptists, the other Catholics, like none of them matter. None of them are Christian. So I've finally decided that, okay, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to get somebody who actually has a master's in theology to give the real reason why that's not the fucking case.
Right. I've never understood that either, why all the other denominations claim Catholicism isn't Christianity. I mean, I figured if you worship Christ, hence you're Christian. Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Um,
Like Catholics have the extra stuff, like the sacraments, and they have a different system on tithes and a few things like that, and they've got the
yeah.
same system. But I mean, if they, as far as I know, as long as you're okay with John 3:16, then you're a Christian. Like that's what I've gathered.
Right, right. Okay, and so when did you start doubting religion, and why? I mean, what was the catalyst that made you start doubting?
Hold on. So for me, I guess when I was in high school, the first well, it was actually before in high school. Um, I was in elementary school, and my grandpa had actually had a conversation with me, and I grew up in a King James only setting. Even though
Hmm.
PCA accepted all denominations, they did not accept all Bibles. They were strict KJV. So I grew up using the KJV, whereas my grandpa grew up using the NIV. The
Mm.
NIV, of course, having, if memory serves, having Catholic origins. So to me, it was just like you're using the wrong Bible. You're supposed to be using the King James version. That's the correct one. This was little like 8-year-old me arguing with my grandpa, who used to be a teacher. And the way he handled that conversation was going, let's have this conversation again in 10 years. And obviously for me as a kid, 10 years in the future was a very long time.
Yeah, that's a lifetime.
But and I had actually forgotten about that conversation, but lo and behold, about 8-10 years later, he said, do you remember that conversation we had about the King James only Bible? And I was like, yeah, I do. And he goes, do you still think that it's the only valid version of the Bible? And I was like, no, I don't. So that was the first kind of wedge in there, was realizing that, oh, these other versions of the Bible are not all suddenly, inept. You're not supposed to just go with the one. In fact, whenever you're exegeting the Bible, you don't use just one version of the Bible. You take the Bible as it is, and then you look at the original Greek, and then you look at the original Hebrew if you're in the Old Testament. Like, you don't just take the one book and say, this thing's inerrant. It's infallible by itself. No, you have to do more work than that. And as I started to realize that was that first little wedge, because that taught me a bit of critical thinking. And the critical thinking that I developed from that conversation led into other things. There was an attempt at deconverting me after that. A friend of mine showed me Zeitgeist, if anybody here's ever seen that before. Mm-hmm. It's a clusterfuck of misinformation. That film it's a good propaganda piece. It's a wonderfully engaging piece of media, but 80% of what's actually said in it is so absurdly and patently false. But I accepted all of it as true when this weird cognitive dissonance thing happened. I accepted most of the claims that the movie made, but it didn't put a dent in my Christianity. I was just like, oh, yeah, no, if religion is the problem, then that's fine. You can just believe in Christ and it's not a religion somehow magically, was the way that I malformed that in my head.
Right.
So those were the first things, like the first attempts at like getting me to think more critically about my religion. And strangely enough, the one that was trying to get me to think more critically within my religion as opposed to without had the bigger impact. Likewise, I had a teacher in high school who was Catholic. And when I was in Pensacola Christian Academy, we were taught that evolution was a scam. But when I went to high school and my teacher was teaching evolution and science and they were Catholic, it was kind of that interesting set of, oh, wait a minute, hold on. This person's Christian and they believe in evolution? That's weird. Maybe evolution isn't the devil.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of gave you a little bit of an aha moment, I take it.
Yeah, that was one of those moments that made me go, well, hold on, no, these things aren't really adding up the way that I thought they were going to add up. They're not quite doing the things that I thought they were going to. So there was it's a moment that will always stick with me in one way, shape, form, or another, where a wedge was put in. Like, all the wedges that were put into my faith were put in from within the faith. Almost none of them were put in from without. I wasn't influenced by like the Matt Dillahunties and the Aaron Raws and the Richard Dawkins and the Christopher Hitchens of the world. I wasn't influenced by any of that. It was all within the faith that got me out of the faith.
Okay, that's cool. So would you say you've always kind of been a skeptic about not just religion, but a skeptic in general? I mean, have you always been one that you'd like evidence before you believe?
Not always. I developed that shortly after high school. Before then, I was just like ridiculously curious. I would just do research constantly on things. Like, I would be eating a thing of yogurt and the condensation would appear on the outside of the yogurt. And I would go, well, why the hell is my yogurt sweating? And then I would go research and come across condensation and how it worked and why it works better when, there's a lid on and off and things like that. And I started to go down this path of constantly researching things and constantly being curious about things like this. But I wouldn't say my skepticism really developed until after high school, because after high school, I had been so gullible. I had had friendships that fell apart because of things that I believed that weren't true. Like, at one point, I had a friend who aimed a shotgun in my head when I was like 9. Like, that was traumatic. And that was because I trusted this person. I wasn't skeptical enough of this person's motives to realize that there was a little more going on under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, I started to develop that skepticism and go, no, maybe not accepting everything on face value is a good idea, which ends up leading into some awkward territory sometimes. I had a relationship for 4 years where we would have conversations, and anytime they'd make a claim, this person was a radical. I have friends who are feminists, and this person was what I would call the stereotypical Tumblr radical feminist.
Okay.
She was an okay person in almost all regards outside of that, but she wouldn't accept anything in science. It was all arguments from emotion, arguments from feelings. So she would get really upset when constantly I would look up information on anything that she said. It was like, why can't you accept anything that I say? Well, I can't. It's not what I do anymore. I don't accept things based on somebody saying them. I don't accept them on face value unless it's something that doesn't matter to me. But if I'm having a conversation, like let's say we're having a conversation about gender identity, if I have no information, I can't engage in this conversation except out of my ass. So I only have one option, and that's to go do some research and then come back to the conversation later.
Exactly.
And so it ended up being that like half the things she said were right. Like, gender is more of an identity issue, but half the things she was saying are wrong, and that there's 31 at least biological sexes. And I'm like, no, that one is incorrect. Gender identity is real, but that multiple, outside of male, female, and various forms of intersex, no, that claim is wrong. And it upset her a lot that we would have these conversations and I would constantly be looking up information on them. But at the same time, that's just kind of the person that I've become. Somebody says, I grew up in the age where, somebody would say, yeah, we have a Pokemon Black version, back when Red, Blue, and Yellow were the only games. And every kid on the block accepted that. And they were like, oh, yeah, no, Black version is real. And it does these ghosty things. And I grew up in a time where that was something that just happened. So I guess maybe there's a little bit of a cynic in me that went, I've fallen for so much shit as a kid. I'm kind of done with it.
Yeah. I've always kind of been a cynic myself. I think that's a Gen Xer thing, though. I think a lot of Gen Xers are very cynical people. What got you started in activism? I mean, what made you want to start a YouTube channel and start, being an activist and, getting people to think?
So I started watching a lot of Holy Kool-Aid, Godless Cranium, and Cosmic Skeptic, and they made the three of them made a huge impact on me. Cosmic Skeptic had a more even-handed approach, whereas Godless Cranium obviously has a little more of a hard-handed approach. He's more of a hardcore anti-theist. And then Thomas Westbrook has more of an educational approach, teach about the science, teach about the issues with the faith. And the three of them together made a huge impact on my want to do these things. I realized that I could not at the time. I could do it now if I had the time to. I could not at the time see myself doing animations like Godless Cranium did. And I could not see myself doing videos over the phone, which was my only camera at the time, like Cosmic Skeptic did, because this is not a great face, and I did not have a good camera at the time. And I've also learned the few times that I've done on-camera videos for my channel, I'm not a huge fan of how they come out. I prefer the animated avatar. I prefer being able to make him, explode around the screen sometimes, as opposed to me just, the most I can do in real life is maybe smack my head against the wall.
Right.
So,
well, not only that, but I kind of like the avatar for the fact that your idea has to, your argument and your ideas have to stand for what they are, and people aren't just watching you for being another pretty face. I think a lot of YouTubers. Well,
they wouldn't be watching me for that in any case, but that's besides.
Well, yeah, I feel the same way about myself. So I'm very self-conscious, but that's just us. I think chubby guys all probably think the same. We all think that we're much uglier than we really are. You know what I mean?
I mean, I chose a shirt that had a stain on it today without realizing it until I looked in my camera. So you can tell that my ability to appear good on camera is quite limited. So in in practically all regards, I prefer being behind the cartoon. But that's where like Godless Cranium's influence came in, because I watched his channel, binged all of his content, and then moved on to Vice Rhino, and then watched Cosmological, a little bit of content that he had. And going through all of their stuff, I realized that I can do the motion background with an avatar, and I can provide my own spin on it. And then I started watching Apologia and seeing how he has the presentation style where he's sitting there, you know, almost at a desk, and he's got a screen next to him. And I was like, I like that style. He's got his avatar there. He's blinking. He's addressing the audience. His mouth is closed when the video is going. His mouth is open when the video is not. I'm going to take the Godless Cranium Vice Rhino style, and I'm going to mix it with the Apologia style, and that's going to be my style. I'm going to have the avatar looking at the camera and talking. It's going to look like Godless Cranium and Vice Rhino's videos, but when the presentation is happening, it's going to look like Apologia's videos. And I wanted that to be how I went about things. Just because they were the ones that, you know, over time influenced me to do that. I wasn't really influenced into doing activism, though, until Cranium got his Imagine a World Without Religion video shut down by YouTube. Once that video was shut down, like I listened to the video, and I listened to Holy Kool-Aid, because he had mirrored it on his channel, say, hey, mirror this on all of your channels. And then going through the video, I would hear people whose voices I knew from watching their channels say things that had happened to them, or like, you know, one of them couldn't actually get a particular illness healed because it required stem cell research, and stem cell research has been notoriously fought against by the religious right. So that made me just kind of go, oh, no, I don't just want to make educational videos. I also want to do some type of activism. I've since slipped more into the educational part again and less into the activism, but the activism part is still there. I still would prefer that, you know, legislation is never passed with religious influence. I still would prefer that a parent never make a decision based on their child's future based on their religion. Those are things that I still can and will fight for at any point in time. But I think the best way to do that is through education. So that's how I do most of the stuff on my channel, with the exception of the occasional entertainment video. If I'm doing like a Discount Hoven video, I'm not trying to educate anybody. I'm trying to get people to laugh.
Right.
Laugh at my pain.
Exactly, low-hanging fruit. Now, I like your channel because you have such a wide variety of subjects. How do you come up with your ideas for videos? I mean, you have such a wide variety.
I have a gaping asshole, and I pull all of my ideas right out of it.
Awesome. That is wonderful.
I'm not even lying. There are actually several videos on my channel. Strangely enough, some of them do very well when this is the case. That the idea for the videos come perhaps 6 hours before they're even uploaded. Like some of my video responses, I'll just be sitting there trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do a video response on? I have no idea. And then sometimes it just ends up that it just comes out really well. Outside of that, though, what I'll sometimes do is I'll talk to, like, I have a few members of my audience that are really heavy into philosophy. And so I'll ask some of them, or I'll, you know, ask Steve McRae or Godless Iowan, because both of them are also heavy into philosophy. Go, hey, what is a topic that has not been covered enough philosophically that I can go do some research on and present a video on? When I did my video on Clifford's Principle, that was entirely Steve's idea. And Steve doesn't even hold to Clifford's Principle. He just thought that it was a thing that not enough information had been put out on. The atheism video was done strictly because I saw the Messianic Maniac trying to do his things on Non Sequitur Show, and I realized that it's a position that I really didn't see a good justification for. So I wanted to do a video on my thoughts on atheism and its history. So the philosophical topics are generally because something has happened around. Dangers of Woo as well. I'll either see something on like Non Sequitur Show, like the allegedly Dave who drank piss, and so I did an entire video on urine therapy after that. Or it'll be something that like somebody mentions in conversation. Like I'll be sitting in line at the grocery store and hearing somebody say, "Oh wow, no, these healing crystals are amazing. That you just put some here, you put some here, and the entire energy in the world gets better." And then I'll do a video on that. Or like I have one person, Clade Starfish. I think he's still watching right now, but he was actually the one that suggested he suggested the Orgone energy video. Sent that to me in an email. So I figured, yeah, no, I'll go ahead and do a video on Orgone energy, because it also just so happened that when I was doing my research on Orgone energy, spirit science came up, and I knew at some point I would be tackling spirit science. So it was just like, no, this is perfect. I'm just going to tackle spirit science's video on Orgone energy. It's going to be knocking out two birds with one stone. Great. So most of the time, if it's not a video response, if it's an LHAC or Dangers of Woo, it's probably been discussed with some number of people, and then I've decided to do a video on it based on those discussions. If it's a video response, 9 times out of 10, I've pulled the response out of my butt. Unless, of course, somebody sends me a video and says, this shit needs debunking.
I got a question from the chat, and that kind of goes along with what we're talking about. I'm not sure how he pronounces his name, Dr. Ford Worker. How much
drag worker? That's drag worker.
Okay, how much do you directly script what you're going to say in your videos?
I don't use a script. I have not used a script for the last 80 videos.
So you just off the top of your head?
Not necessarily. It's not off the top of my head. What I do is I'll have multiple tabs open.
Like bullet points?
Either sometimes it's bullet points, sometimes it'll be tags. Like when I did the atheism video, I had the history of atheism, which is only like freaking 50 years, so it's not even a whole lot. The history of atheism was in one tab, and then I had the history of wine, who was the guy who came up with the idea of atheism, in another tab. And I would flip between the tabs based on which part I was going to be talking about. But as far as writing an actual script, I don't. What I do is I'll open up my recorder and I'll speak about 3 seconds of dialogue, and then I'll cut it. And then I'll speak another 3 seconds of dialogue, and then I'll cut it. And then I'll speak another 3 or 4 seconds of dialogue, and then I'll cut it. And that does a few things for me. One, it makes it sound less like I'm reading, because I'm not reading anything. And two, when I'm doing recording like that, it gives me a chance to listen to my audio as I'm going, to check for errors, get rid of the sound of the clicking of my mouse. Sometimes that still slips in there. It lets me get rid of breaths, because I hate it when I'm listening to a video and I'm constantly hearing the breaths of the person who's talking. Right. And that happens all the time. I can tolerate it in live stuff, but when it's edited stuff, I'm like, no, I don't like those breaths in there. I prefer to have that sound maybe a smidge more professional. So that's one of my ways of making sure that I cut breaths out. Because if I'm trying to read a paragraph and I'm trying to get the paragraph all out in one sentence, or in one breath rather, it sometimes sounds really rushed. Or alternatively, I won't even notice that I'm breathing, because I'm conscious of my breaths when I'm recording, because I have to be. But sometimes you're not conscious of your breaths. You just start breathing naturally because, you're a human being. That's fairly normal. So when that's happening, I freak out when I'm listening into my recording and I see that little bit in the waveform where I know it's a breath. And I'm like, oh, God damn it. I've just made more work for myself.
That's funny. So now, why do you think Americans seem to latch on to religion and every crazy woo thing that comes out more than they do in other Western societies? What is it about Americans that make them do that?
I don't know if it's necessarily a wholly American thing. I know that in Canada you have a similar thing. In Mexico, they're heavily Catholic. And I know that obviously in the Middle East, you have a heavy Muslim influence in many places there.
Well, yeah.
Although I will say that as far as Western society goes, the United States is probably the least Western society of Western society. So it might just be the fact that we have more Puritan ideals that stem from the culture of Christianity that's around us. And then the people who do leave their faith, I know that for some people, there's that idea that you have to have something to replace it sometimes. It might be that those people who are looking for something to replace it with some of your more new agey stuff and end up, going through that instead. But as far as a hard answer for that, I don't know. It's not something that I've done a terribly lot of research on. And again, I'm fairly certain that it's decently consistent across parts of Canada and across Mexico, especially, that it's kind of the same way. There's a lot of the same influence in those areas. But here, at least, I will say that we are not as westernized as I wish we were.
Another part of that? What do you think some of the dangers of religion and woo are?
Well, it depends. Are you saying the dangers of religion or the dangers of woo? Because those are very different concepts.
Okay, both actually. Like, answer each separately. Like, what do you think the dangers of religions are, and then what do you think the dangers of woo are?
So, I'd start with woo. If you let's take Orgone energy as an example. If you believe something like Orgone energy, you are probably a lot more susceptible to believing other things that really don't make a whole lot of sense, and saying that for instance, I have a friend who says, scientific consensus doesn't matter, it's all a conspiracy, blah 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 blah. Your woo and your conspiracy theories, 9 times out of 10, and when you have somebody who believes in one of those things, they usually don't believe in just one.
Right.
So I guess you can consider woo just kind of its own type of gateway drug. And I don't like that term because gateway drugs aren't a thing the same way that people like to think of them classically. Like,
no,
people think that pot's a gateway drug, and I'm like, no, it's not a gateway drug. It's the fact that pot's illegal, and the same methods of obtaining it are the same methods you'd use to obtain anything else. That's the gateway mechanism. It's not the drug. It's the fact that you're working in that culture. So I do think the issue with woo is that it's one bit of woo might not be terribly harmful, but it ends up leading somebody down the line of just an entire gateway of lack of critical thinking. Religion, I think, has a bit of a same issue. I'm not totally against religion. I am an anti-theist, especially against religions that I find particular issue from, like Christianity, like Islam. I mean, look at Surah 2 and Surah 4 and tell me that there's equality in Islam. I'm going to laugh. So for me, the issue with religion is not so much that religion exists, because functionally government isn't much different than religion. It's the fact that you're under a state and you have a set of laws that you go by. Functionally, you're going to go through a lot of the same things that you go through in religion. The issue with religion, though, is that in a government, even though you functionally are doing the same things, you can, at least here in America, you can have those laws changed. Like, let's say that, for instance, there's still 12 states where sodomy is illegal. It's a blue book law, but it's still illegal. Or like back when slavery was illegal. In a government, even though a lot of the structures are the same, you can vote to have those things repealed. You can vote to change things. You can vote to reform issues in your government. You don't really have that same liberty in a religion, especially when you assign some of those laws as irrefutable laws passed down by God. Like, ask anybody who thinks that you should follow the 10 Commandments if they should follow the New Covenant, and they'll answer yes to both, not realizing that those are contradictory positions. So that's where I think the issue with religion is that even though you've got a lot of the same functions as government, you have inerrancy. And I think inerrancy is bad because it creates an unassailable position where if there's something that's morally unjust or morally corrupt within that structure, you can't address it. I can't say to a fundamentalist Christian, you need to think differently about homosexuality. It's not a choice. And then they would just say, well, no, my book says that they're going to hell. So it might not be a choice for them to be homosexual. It would just be a choice for them to do homosexual acts. So they need to burn in hell for doing those things. And then they have some apologetic nonsense about how none of us have a choice about being born in sin, but we still end up sinning just like homosexuals do. So homosexuals need to deal with the same shit we deal with and deal with the fact that we're a world in sin and need to stop sinning and need to not go to hell. You've probably heard that line of logic before, and it's a line of logic that you can't assail, because to assail it you have to deconstruct the book, but the book is not deconstructible in the person that you're talking to's mind. So now you have a position that can't be changed unless they throw their book away somehow. But 9 times out of 10 they won't. That's the problem with religion. You can get a politician to change his mind on something. Could be hard, useless, But it's a lot harder to get somebody to change their mind about something in religion without referencing the religion itself. As an example, I know some people who are gay and Christian because they've looked at the exegesis for Leviticus and found that the anti-homosexual lines in Leviticus are actually talking about appropriative temple sex for pagans. And there's like 6 other different iterations that can, or 6 different interpretations that can come from those scriptures that are not all homosexuality is bad. And that's their way of justifying that, oh, no, I can still be homosexual and a Christian because the original translation of these verses in the Bible doesn't mean the same thing that people like Stephen Anderson purport to.
Right.
But again, is that they're having to reference back to the book.
Right. It always goes back to the book. It always. And I loved that. I'd never heard about the Clifford principle until I seen it in your video, and I loved that. Once I found that, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Frustrated atheist wanted me to ask you, are you an atheist because you're mad at God for making you short?
That is a nonsensical question, and Russ knows that.
I know. That's why I did it.
The actual term for somebody who has their position because they hate God would be a mesotheist. A mesotheist has their position because they hate God, and a mesotheist, by definition, can't be an atheist because they have to believe in the God in the first place to hate them. Whereas an atheist would just assert or lack a belief, depending on how hard you want your philosophical definition to be. They don't have the same belief in the God that the mesotheist requires. I know he probably didn't expect a straight answer to that, but there is in fact a straight answer to that.
Right. Yeah. Like I'd never heard of what is it? Agnosticism? Is that what it was?
Agnostic, atheism. Both of them are there's some philosophers that deliberate on whether or not they're the same. And as far as I'm concerned, they're functionally completely identical.
Hey, chill. Okay. So who was so you said Godless Cranium was your first experience with YouTube atheism?
No, my first one was Holy Kool-Aid, and then Cosmic Skeptic came after that, and then Godless Cranium came after that, and then after Cranium, it was Vice Rhino and Apologia roughly at the same time.
Okay.
Cool, and then Armored Skeptic was in there somewhere. I don't remember where Greg sits in.
Yeah. Greg, I think it was probably either Armored Skeptic or Logic were my first ones.
Some of the more OGs.
Yeah, but this isn't about me; it's about you. So, do you think that there's different? Do you think different Christians pose different dangers? Compared from people like your Kent Hams and your Kent Hovens, and then going on down to your Matt Powells and your Steve Andersons. Do you think they pose a different kind of danger?
Certainly. So, for instance, if you're dealing with mostly Catholics, the danger you're going to have there is their views on sex. It's almost all exclusively going to be their views on sex because they're notoriously pro-science. Most of the funding for scientific education came from them back in the day, so of course they are. They have an investment in there. But like Catholics are very pro-science, but their views on sex and sexuality are very, very harmful. Like there are a lot of Catholic ideas on procreation, whether or not you should use condoms, whether or not you should hand condoms out in villages to prevent the spread of virulent diseases. Those are some of the dangers you'll get when you're dealing with the ideals of Catholicism. But if you're dealing with like the fundamentalist movements, you're going to be dealing with a lot of anti-science legislation on top of a lot of them subscribe to the Quiverful movement. So they also have the, don't use protection ideals in there as well, on top of all of the other anti-science stuff they have, which is a very different mentality. And all the way down to your types of Christians that creates instances like Jonestown, where people honestly believe that you have a new iteration of Jesus as this prophet, and they manage to lead their whole congregation into being an isolated society. that's another form of danger that you have there that you don't necessarily have the same way. You might have it a little with Kent Hovind since he is building up his compound. But you don't have that danger the same way with Catholicism, but you do in fact have it with your cults of personality that appropriate Christianity into their culture they're trying to build. I recently did a video with Elijah Davalos on a guy named Joshua. He's a prophet who has a bunch of people on Facebook literally changing their last names to his last name. I see that as incredibly dangerous, but it's a different kind of danger than not passing out condoms in Uganda.
Right. That is a huge thing. So another one of my questions are, what are some of the fallacies Christians use that drive you nuts? What are some of the worst ones?
That's a bit of I don't want to say that's a malformed question, because a lot of the fallacies that I'll accuse Christians of using are the same fallacies I'll accuse atheists of using. So it'd be more that there's fallacies that people use.
Okay, let me rephrase it that way. What are some of the fallacies that people in general use that drive you nuts?
One of them would be an appeal to authority. I can't stand when people have this appeal to authority. Like a lot of Christians will do it, and sometimes atheists will as well. With Christians, though, the appeal to authority usually comes to the Bible. The Bible is their authority. Some things that was said in the Bible must be correct because it was said in the Bible. That's an appeal to authority. Just like I hate it when people engage in the nose counting fallacy, where the mere fact that a lot of people agree with something means that it's suddenly more true. That's so many types of incorrect, because if that was the case, then there are more Muslims than Catholics, so Islam is more true than Catholicism, and that just, it irks me. Another one that I'm not a huge fan of is special pleading. I really can't stand special pleading, and I can't stand when special pleading is misused as well. With Christians, you get actual special pleading sometimes, and with atheists, you get a misappropriation of special pleading. Like if a theist is positing that a first cause was God, and God was the one thing that was uncaused, that's not special pleading. That's not the fallacy. But atheists, no less, will still call it special pleading when it's not. It's just you're defining the deity that way. You're not saying that the deity has to operate under the same laws as everything else. And I think you can still assail that deity. You can still knock that deity down without having to engage in a fallacy. So those are some of the things that bother me. Is not just when fallacies are used, but when somebody misappropriates a fallacy and as a result comes to a really improper conclusion. Like, I agree with most atheists. God most likely does not exist. But at the same time, you don't have to engage in bad thinking to get to that conclusion.
Right. Clade has a question for you, and that would be, what is the most frustrating thing online atheists bring up?
The most frustrating thing online atheists bring up? I'm trying to think. I think the most frustrating thing is whenever they try to paint things in very broad strokes. That's the thing that bothers me more than anything, because, for instance, a sentence like this, you can hear this coming from a YouTube atheist. In fact, I think this is maybe something I've said myself at one point without even realizing how egregious it is. But saying you can't paint all atheists with broad strokes, referring to something like Pol Pot and Mao Zedong and Stalin.
Right.
But then at the same time going, but oh, by the way, Hitler was a Catholic, so ha ha. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. So they can't paint with broad strokes. Why do you suddenly get the ability to? And oh, by the way, that's the tu quoque fallacy. That's what about you? So that's one of the things that bothers me, is when you engage in tu quoque there. I can't stand when religious people call atheism a religion and then say, well, you've got all the hallmarks of a religion. It's like, yeah, but if I'm saying that the problem with your religion is this, are you then agreeing with me that those problems exist? And I don't like it when atheists do similar things, especially when you're bringing up morality. It's very bothersome. I guess the other thing that a lot of YouTube atheists do that I'm not a big fan of is the oversimplification of morality. It's not a simple concept. It's a concept that's been discussed for over 3,000 years, and no conclusion has really been met. You did not suddenly get to a correct conclusion in your armchair. You didn't. I'm sorry. That goes for theists as well. You didn't suddenly get to the correct conclusion on morality. Even if you think you did, you didn't.
Right. Right. That's understandable. So, what's your your favorite video you've made? Would you say?
The favorite video that I've made?
Yeah.
I'm gonna hate myself, but I actually have a lot of fun with the Discount Oven series.
There's no reason to hate that.
No, I hate it because I go through physical pain when I make that series.
Oh, okay. Because Hovind is so much fun to make fun of, though. You know, I mean, it's like when you have a loose tooth and you can't stop messing with it. It's that kind of thing. You know, you just can't help yourself but do it. Even though it hurts, you keep doing it.
you just keep poking it. You just keep poking at the pig, and you're like, I know you're gonna try to impale me. It's fine. I'm just gonna keep poking. Okay. It's okay.
All right. Now, I want to go a little bit off of atheism. Other than your atheism and your YouTube, I see you have quite. I love your decor. I have a lot of the same decor. By the way, I'm a huge nerd myself. What are some of your other hobbies and interests?
So obviously, based on what's over here, it's gaming. I'm not huge into anime, but I like anime, so some of that is also in posters behind me as well. I don't keep current with any seasonal anime. I had like Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid I watched maybe like a year and a half after it came out. Sword Art I watched like a year or two after it came out. Still fucking hate that show. It's a bad show. And I'm not terribly into movies either, because the idea of like sitting down and not doing anything for long periods of time just bugs the fuck out of me. I prefer actively doing something. So usually what I'm doing is playing something like League of Legends or Paladins, just games that I can play with my friends and I can just kind of chill out to. Because in my opinion, there's there's really three types of video games. Video games you play for a challenge, video games you play for companionship, and video games you play for experiences. I'd play something like Undertale for an experience. I'd play something like Ninja Gaiden or Dark Souls for a challenge, and something like League of Legends is what I'd play for hanging out with my friends.
Are you a strictly a PC gamer, or do you console game too?
Well, first of all, I want to address Frustrated Atheist. Lies I dragged on about anime in Pam's streams. Incorrect. I dragged on about Dragon Ball in Pam's stream because me and Wonder Lady were having an argument about whether or not Goku is a good father. He's still not a good father, by the way. We dragged on about that specifically and a few other isolated anime, but we did not drag on about the idea of anime in general. Pam's actually seen more anime than me. So it's okay, Russ. You can be wrong. It's fine. But, and then if you can repeat what you had asked one more time, now that I'm done dogging on Russ.
Oh, I was just asking. Oh, I asked if you were strictly a PC gamer, or do you also console game?
Well, so the answer to that is pretty simple. I'm a strictly PC gamer for the most part, but I do have consoles.
Okay.
What I'll typically do is I'll grab whatever Nintendo console is recent, just because I can't really justify not being able to play the latest Zelda game. It's something that I really
fucking awesome.
like. If I can't play the latest Zelda or the latest Pokemon game, there's something just kind of missing from my soul. But outside of that, most of the games that I would want to play on the PS4 or on the Xbox are also available on the PC. Like, the only game on PS4 and Xbox that I'm like really, really wanting to play is Monster Hunter World, and that just so happens to be on PC as well, so I've stopped caring.
Have you taken on hero mode on Breath of the Wild?
No, I haven't, and the reason I haven't is I beat Breath of the Wild, and then I didn't get the expansion because I knew that I beat it on the Wii U because I didn't own a Switch yet. And then I borrowed my friend's copy of Xenoblade Chronicles for so long, or Xenoblade Chronicles X, that he bought himself a new copy of Xenoblade Chronicles and let me keep his copy. So for his birthday, I let him keep my copy of Breath of the Wild. And so then I ended up borrowing my friend's copy of Breath of the Wild on the Switch. Obviously, that meant I had to start over again. I have not beaten it again on the Switch yet, and I gave the game back to him since I got Monster Hunter Generations and Let's Go Eevee. So I have not started hero mode, nor have I played the DLC yet.
Cool, cool. Do you like reading at all? Are you a reader?
I'm bigger into audiobooks than reading in general. I do have, not over here, I have a few of my books over here. I also have a shelf over there of a bunch of books that I've read. I still have the entire Left Behind series. I kind of regret that, but I still have it.
I read it too, actually.
It was compelling when I was a Christian.
Yeah. And Ted, have you ever heard of Ted Decker? He writes some pretty interesting. I mean, it's Christian fantasy, but it's still fairly interesting. You know,
I haven't heard of him.
Still fairly interesting. Do you, and now, okay. I have
the best book though. The book that everybody should read for a little bit of entertainment. And if you haven't read this book, then you really should give it a try.
What's that?
Can you see on the screen?
I'm watching the actual screen. I'm not on the. Oh, the Book of Mormon. I was going to say my suggestion, if you want to read a good book, would be American Gods by Neil Gaiman. That's a fucking excellent book. I've
been suggested that book before as well. What I was going to say before is I'm more into audiobooks. I'm actually in the middle of reading a Hugh Ross book right now because I said that I would. So of course it's sitting in kind of played. It's a boring book. It's a very boring book.
So okay, now are you a comic fan?
Yes. Here in the last year, I've become a lot bigger into comics. Originally, as a kid, the only comic that I'd gone through was Spider-Man Maximum Carnage. Without ever reading Secret Wars or anything, so I had no idea why the fuck Venom had the same suit. It was something that I didn't understand as a kid. And then I grew up watching like Justice League and stuff growing up, the cartoon show, the actual good Justice League, not the movie. And then as a result, here now in the last year, I've actually gone through some of the older comic stories and some of the more recent ones as well, which has also led me to be kind of upset at some of the ways that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has handled things, because they don't, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't tackle like Tony Stark's alcoholism. It doesn't tackle his relationship with Loki, because there actually is a pretty prominent scene in the comics where Tony is in the middle of suffering and Loki like ends up having to comfort him, because as much as he wants to fight him, he's just like, no, I get it. I've been kicked when I'm down. I'm not going to kick you when you're down. Stuff like that is just really interesting. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't have a lot of that, especially like Scarlet Witch in the comics is as powerful as Thanos is with the Infinity Gauntlet in the movie, because in the comics she's able to end all mutants with just a sentence, just because she's having a bad day. Like that's a lot of power for somebody who's just having a bad day.
Yeah, that's huge. Now, are you a Marvel or a DC guy? Do you have a preference?
I am far more into DC than I am into Marvel.
I am too.
I think that Marvel has some compelling stories, but I think they're compelling in their cinematic versions and not so much in their original versions. Because if you look at your Marvel comics, Thanos is. Have you seen Infinity War yet?
No, I haven't. Not yet.
Okay,
but it's okay. You can tell me about it if you want. I don't mind.
Okay,
I'll still watch it.
I'm not going to spoil anything aside from the fact that Thanos' reasons for trying to find the Infinity Gauntlet are that he wants to wipe out half of all life, because he sees that all populations all have this issue of he's trying to solve overpopulation. And it's compelling. He's trying to save everybody, but the way he's doing it is really bad. It's really malformed. But of course it is. He's the villain. He doesn't see himself as the villain. That's compelling. That's a good narrative villain. The way that he's handled comic books is Thanos wanted to fuck Lady Death, so he decided he needed to kill a lot of people. That's not compelling.
No. The thing I think that the problem with I think DC make way better their animated movies are way better. You know, like Flashpoint Paradox and
Under the Red Hood.
Yeah, but I think Marvel makes better live action movies.
Yes, the Marvel live action movies are stupendous, but the DC animated movies are equally stupendous. But like with DC, the level of silliness that comes from the DC comics is a little. It's just as bad sometimes, but sometimes it's not as bad. Like if you've seen Under the Red Hood, in the End of the Red Hood movie, Jason Todd comes back because Ra's al Ghul got Jason Todd killed by the Joker, and that wasn't his intent. He likes Batman, so he wants to make amends with him. So he has Jason Todd revitalized with the Lazarus Pit. In the original story, though, it was a little more dumb. Superboy Prime got mad and punched the universe real hard.
Yeah, I think I like the it seems like whoever's making the live action DC movies has read maybe one or two comic books and then thinks they know how the characters should be, and
which would be why we have Batman using a gun in Batman v Superman.
Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. It's fucking so ridiculous. I think that they should. I think that Marvel at least does a better job of getting to know the characters better. And I also don't like the way the DC mashes storylines together to make one storyline. You know what I mean?
Yeah, some of the DC events do get mashed together a lot. Like if you've read Dark Knight's Metal at all for DC Comics, that's a very recent story.
I don't think I haven't read that yet. No.
Have you read the story where Darkseid sends Batman, or Darkseid kills Batman, and for 2 years, like Dick Grayson takes over as Batman for a while?
Yes.
Okay, so Dark Knight's Metal piggybacks off of that, but it also piggybacks off of literally every other Batman story. There's so much back reading you have to read to get Dark Knight's Metal fully. It gets kind of ridiculous. The basic concept of Dark Knight's Metal is that there's the new 52, where you've got the 52 Earths where everything is honky-dory. And then in the negative space, is where all universes collapse. So any Earth that is not one of the 52 Earths exists only up until the point where it doesn't, and then it all falls apart and reality breaks. And there's 7 realities where Batman is the one that breaks the reality and fucks everything up. One of them, he basically goes on this crusade against Flash, because Flash has the ability to go back in time with the cosmic treadmill, and he hates it because he's like, no, you could fix so many things. You could fix all of this. Why aren't you doing that, Barry? And Barry Allen's trying to explain to him that that's not how it works. You fuck with something in the past, you get screwed up. You end up having everything ends up screwing with you. You could end up having like the Black Flash come and try to kill you. Yeah, like there's so much wrong with going back in the past and trying to fix things. That was the whole plot behind Flashpoint Paradox.
Yeah, like when he went back and saved his mother's life, and then he came back and everything was all fucked up. You know.
Yes, but Batman doesn't understand that. At least in that universe, he doesn't. So what he does is he hijacks the weapons from all the Flash's rogues gallery. So he'll like use Captain Cold's ray gun on him and then hop into a window with Mirror Master's belt and like pop around, and then attach some of Captain Boomerang's tech to his weapon so that he can track Flash and attack him that way. Basically just is a one-man army with his entire rogues gallery's weapons. Beats Flash into submission, attaches him to the Batmobile, retrofits the cosmic treadmill onto the Batmobile, and then tries going backwards in time to fix everything, gets himself fused with the Flash because the Speed Force won't give Batman those powers. It only lets them sit in Barry's body. So it fuses their bodies, and then he becomes the Red Death. And he kills his entire rogues gallery, fixes everything in Gotham, but then reality breaks apart because that's not how things are supposed to be.
Right.
And then there's another version where Superman goes rogue, kills everybody, and Batman's only way of stopping Superman is by injecting himself with the Doomsday virus. Batman becomes Doomsday, kills Superman, but then, of course, the balance in his world is fucked up too, and reality breaks apart. And so, like, all these different iterations of Batman, including one where he basically becomes the Joker, he becomes the Batman who laughs. All these different iterations of Batman come to Earth Prime and try to take it over because they all want their Earth back, but all of their Earths have been destroyed because of their own actions. So they go to this new Earth to try to make everything better for themselves, but they're all severely corrupted versions of Batman, so their methods of doing this cause a lot of death. It's a very, I don't want to spoil any more than those little bits from the story.
No, that's okay. I'm a huge comic nerd, so I'll still check it out. Now I have one more question, or sure. Not now. I have actually a couple more questions, but Batman or Superman?
I would definitely say Batman. I think Superman is the giant writing problem. Yes. With Batman, Batman is the same reason that I like the story of like Dragon Ball. You can tell the story of somebody who is weaker than everybody around him and has to build himself up to become on their level. It's a human trying to fill the shoes of a god.
Right.
I
exactly.
like that kind of story. It's a lot more down to earth. Like anybody who hasn't seen Dragon Ball thinks that Goku is just like Superman. He's got all these powers and he beats the bad guys and that's it. No, Goku is almost notoriously always weaker than whoever he's trying to fight. It's almost always a story of how does he overcome that. I find that way more compelling than Superman having to hold back. Like,
right.
The reason that Superman has to hold back against Lex is because he'll go rogue and kill everybody if he kills Lex or Joker or anybody. Okay, cool, right. But that's a writing constraint. That's a constraint you had to put on the character because you wrote the character to be too powerful.
Right, exactly. But I love Batman for pretty much the same reason. He's a mortal amongst gods pretty much, and he holds his own. And his superpower is his brain, and I love that about it. You know, I mean, he's not just going to, you know, I mean, yeah, he's a badass, but I mean, I love the fact that his brain is his superpower. That's why I love Batman so much, I think.
Well, yeah, when Superman is trying to fight Darkseid, he's almost always going to try to beat Darkseid down and prove that he's stronger, which he's not. Darkseid is one of the few people that can overpower Superman. But when you've got Batman, Batman will rig his entire planet to explode and hold his planet hostage because he doesn't have anything else. And guess which one of those actually beats Darkseid? Batman.
Right, exactly.
Batman has a better track record against Darkseid than Superman does.
Yeah, that's why Batman's leader of the Justice League. Obviously, I mean, they didn't make him the leader for nothing. You know,
Superman's leader of the Justice League, though. Well, Batman used
to be. Oh, is he now? Okay, well, he used to be.
in the movie,
I'm a little behind.
Like Batman,
I'm a little behind on my.
Batman funds everything, but functionally, Superman's more of the leader to the Justice League than Batman is.
Oh yeah, I guess in that way, I suppose you're right. Yeah, but Superman can literally sit inside the sun and just mega power himself to such emergency.
There's actually a story where Superman goes into the sun and absorbs the sun's power for thousands of years.
All-Star? Isn't that Superman All-Star?
Yeah, he absorbs all those powers. He comes back with the powers of a god. He resurrects Lois Lane and then lives out his life as God.
Yeah.
That's not a compelling story. That's just a cool what-if scenario. That's not a compelling story, though, and that's the issue I have with Superman. Is like you can tell compelling stories with Superman, but most of the characters that you can tell compelling stories of Superman with are characters that have something on him. Lex, he's a prominent public figure. Superman can't just beat him up. Okay, cool. That's a writing constraint that stopped you from doing something to Lex. Brainiac. He understands Kryptonian DNA, and therefore he has thousands of countermeasures to deal with Superman. Cool, you have a writing constraint that stops Brainiac from being beaten by Superman. Super easy. Doomsday. Doomsday is genetically engineered to only kill Kryptonians who are under the effects of a yellow sun. You have villains that are engineered to fight Superman. Whereas like in Batman's rogues gallery, you can place a lot of his rogues into other universes and they still function. Take Superman's rogues and place them in other universes. Some of them function. Like a Lex Luthor is always going to be a good villain. But a Doomsday isn't going to be anywhere near as compelling outside of his ability to kill Superman. And a lot of comic writers have even figured that out because other stories they've tried to use that involve Doomsday don't work as well when it's not about the death of Superman.
Right, exactly. Okay, now my final question, actually, as we've been going about an hour, here's my final question for you.
Sure.
Are you suffering any trauma of the Great Peanut Butter War of 2018?
I'm sorry, what?
I said, are you suffering any trauma of the Great Peanut Butter War of 2018?
It happened again. What was that? I'm hoping this time you got the joke.
Oh, okay. No,
it was a malformed shell shock joke.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. I got it. You got shell shock and PTSD.
Spooky Bit Hair says that's not the real Suris, it's the evil Suris. Just look at the understated goatee. I'd say as far as the Peanut Butter War goes, we all lost a bionic dance.
Right. Well, so I've had a wonderful time. We've been going about an hour. I don't know if anybody'd be interested in an after show. If anybody is, we'll go a minute. Type in the comments if you'd like to have one. I don't know if you're busy or not, Suris, but
I know that I'm going to be in another stream here in about 2.5 hours, but I should be able to hop in for a little bit.
I'm not sure if Neil's got something going on. He usually streams right around this time. I don't know. Does anybody know if Neil has anything going on?
I'm not 100% certain if Neil has anything going on. I really don't know.
Huh. I don't know. So, does anybody want to have an after show? In the comments, let me know, and then I'll give you a minute to answer, and then we'll shut her down, and I'll set one up if you'd like to. I guess I could look at Twitter real quick and see if there's anything in there.
That is a thing you could do.
Yeah, that'd probably be easiest. Okay. Okay. I guess. Yeah, Neil is. I think he's going to be doing Steve. It looks like he's doing Stephen Bauman, I believe, maybe.
Okay.
Is that what it says? So yeah, I suppose. What's it say? My victim tonight is 4 p.m. Pacific. It's Steve McRae. So 4 p.m. Pacific would be 6 o'clock my time. So yeah, we got about 55 minutes. So I guess I suppose we could have a small little after show.
We could.
If anybody would like to. Or I could, instead of having an after show, I could just we could just keep this stream going and invite people to this link since it's already going.
Oh, you can go ahead and do that if you're fine with the bit of clutter on the channel that it'll result in.
Oh yeah, I'll just start another one. That'd probably be easier. So I will start a after show, everybody, and I will throw a link into some DMs. So if you want to hop in, go ahead and hop in. And I want to thank you all for coming. And next Saturday at 5 p.m., Godless Cranium will be here. So hopefully I can see you then. Do you have anything coming up you want to talk about, or what you got going on?
Me and Godless Iowan actually have a collaboration coming up here on Tuesday, I believe, and then this Monday, I believe we have RN Raw joining me, Bionic Dance, and Russ and Atheist Rationale for our slaughtering of Matt Powell.
Oh, awesome!
And I think that's probably news to Russ.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Isn't GI doing something with Artemis in a little bit today? I think like 6 or 6:30.
if my finger were better on the pulse of our community, then I would know. But I have no idea. I've been taking today as my resting day.
If how do you pronounce the drag worker? So how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, drag worker. So for lead speak, 4s are A's, 3s are E's, and 0s are O's.
Okay, I kind of figured that. So if you want to follow me at the Unholy Mole on Twitter, I can send you a DM. I can do that, buddy. So if anybody else wants one, let me know.
Alrighty.
All right. So thanks for coming, and I'll see you in just a minute. I'll get it set up real quick, okay?
Alrighty.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.